In this episode of The Other Side of the Cell, we're going to call this one Fighters versus Killers. And the reason I title that is because in prison situations and in the prison settings, you have two types of inmates. You have inmates that think they're great fighters, and then you have killers, and there's two different breeds. So a lot of guys come into prisons and prison setting thinking they're badasses and think they can fight, especially a lot of younger guys. And then you have the old heads, the OGs, the guys that's been in for a long time, guys that have done a lot of time, and those guys are just built different. So you have guys that understand the system and understand respect. And then you have young guys that come in very disrespectful, very hot-headed and mouthy, and anything and everything comes out of their mouths. And in those aspects, those are the guys that can get hurt, and they can get hurt really bad. I'm thinking of a couple examples of that I've seen by being in the system and working in a prison setting. You have a lot of young guys that come in and think they have something to prove. Well, anytime you got guys like that come into the prison system and they think they got something to prove, well, let me explain something to you. You can get killed trying to prove that you're a badass. And that's kind of some of the things that I've seen, especially when younger guys come in like that and they think that they're going to come in and they're going to run something. Whenever you come into a penitentiary setting, especially if you're a young guy or a new person, the best thing you can do is be quiet, keep your head down, and mind your own business, because that's going to save your life. Because mind your own business, stay out of other people's business. If you see something, shut your mouth. That's the way you survive in prison. Now, staff people, we love inmates that talk. We love inmates that give up information because it makes our life easier. But if you're on the other side of that, you do the opposite. And it's a cat and mouse game. We're trying to get information, you're trying to conceal information. But an example of a story that I have witnessed firsthand is I was working a particular unit. The unit was a behavior unit. It wasn't actually labeled a behavior unit, but it was a behavior unit because that's where all the difficult inmates were. That's where they housed some of the most violent inmates that we had. Well, this particular unit housed about 77 to 80 inmates at a time. It was a layout of a two-tiered cell block. It was a newer built in our facility, so it was a new build. And so basically you had on the bottom tier to your right, you had single cells. When you come around and come up the other side, you had double cells. And then on the top cells all around, they were all singles. And basically the young cats were running that unit. And they had pretty much gotten the unit to a point where there was a lot of disrespect going around. Nobody really understood the concept of how to do time. So a lot of the older inmates, or OGs as we call them, didn't want to go up there and live because they tolerated disrespect like zero. Like, that's not happening. But in this particular case, we had an inmate that decided the facilities decided that he needed to be separated from where he was before. So they had to move institutions, and this guy had to be separated from somebody that was coming into their institution. So they transferred him to our institution. Well, during the intake process, this guy was a pretty infamous inmate, and so people knew who he was in the system. So, of course, they alerted us and the administration that, hey, this guy's coming to your institution, so you are going to need to house him in a highly secure area. You're going to have to house him where basically he's not going to kill somebody if you put him in the wrong dormitory or cell situation. So he was one of those high-profile inmates that, you had to pay attention. And his name was Big Bruce, is what they called him. And we decided that he needed to have a single cell, but we had to put him up on that unit just because of his history. So, knowing that, after he went through the intake process, processed him in, got all his belongings, he was sent up to our unit. Basically, at that time, I pulled him in and said, look, there's a lot of young kids up here, they're knuckleheads, so, you're going to have to adapt and kind of, I'm not saying you got to tolerate it, but I'm saying that you got a lot of young kids up here, so you need to keep that in mind. It's not like the facility you came from. There's not a lot of guys up here doing long stretches of time, and you are. So just I'm just being upfront with you. And basically told me I'll be fine as long as nobody messes with me. I ain't gonna mess with them, but I will not, absolutely will not handle any disrespect. Okay, got it. So basically, we send him to his assigned cell. He goes out to his cell. Immediately, a whole bunch of guys know who he is, recognize him, and some of the older guys that knew his reputation started to warn some of these younger guys, hey man, you don't mess with him, because if you mess with him, he's a killer. He's a stone cold killer. You mess with him, you're gonna have a problem. Well, a lot of the younger guys are like, fuck him. We don't care. What's he gonna do? That's an old man. So basically, there was a young guy. His last name was Peters. I think it was John Peters is his name, and he was one of the knuckleheads. He's a decent sized guy, probably about 6'1", about 215. Pretty. He worked out, so he's a pretty stout individual. And Big Bruce was probably 6'4", probably 260. Didn't work out, but he was a big, strong man. Like I don't know how to describe him other than a big old country fellow that big dude, big guy, big old wrist, big old fingers like that, and his fist was about as big as two fists put together. So anyway, he was in for murder, and he had killed a couple people, and he was notorious for, if you fought him, you had to be willing to die, because that's his mentality. Well, the inmate named Peters was young and dumb, and he allowed some other guys to amp him up and say, hey, he ain't shit, and he ain't running shit up here and all this kind of stuff. And basically what they did was they amped up the younger guy into jumping Big Bruce. And the thing about it is back in those days, what they used for weapons a lot of times were they had padlocks, and they had two locker boxes or two boxes or drawers underneath their cells under the bunks, and they used the combination locks. They were issued two combination locks to secure their property. Well, that turned into they had canvas type, like army type belts that they wore. So what they used to do was they take their belt and they would tie the end of the lock, to the belt and make it like an old-fashioned, like slingshot or medieval times, kind of weapon-like. So if you tie a combination lock on a belt and wrap it around your hands, and you have some velocity to it, you're going to split somebody's head open. So basically, a lot of those guys amped inmate Peters up to attack Big Bruce. So basically, what they did is they talked him into making that move. So it was during a chow call that the way the unit was set up, it was set on a second floor. So to get down to any calls, to go to chow, go to recreation, they had to go down almost 2.5 flights of steps. So when they make a call, everybody lines up and they go out by the control room bubble and down some stairs. So the setup was they were going to talk Peters into attacking that guy during chow. So they went down to chow, no problem. Went down to chow, went to the chow hall, which was probably, a couple hundred feet down the hallway, whatever. And they went to the chow hall and ate, which takes about 15 minutes. But on the way back from chow, the plan was whenever they hit the stairwell, that's when he was going to make his move, because at that time stairwells didn't have cameras in them. So what they did was they knew Bruce had started setting a pattern of always being the last one to finish eating. So they knew that he would be lagging behind and there would be nobody, around. So the move was, you wait till he's done eating and you'll be the last one behind him. And then when he hits the stairwell, that's when you get him. So basically, that's what happened. They waited. The 2 or 3 guys that was talking inmate Peters into attacking him, they waited. They came back from chow, and then as soon as they hit the doorway to go up the steps, he ran up behind him and hit him in the head with the lock. Well, the problem with that is that Big Bruce had been known so much time. He'd been in many fights, and he was a big son of a bitch, and he didn't take shit from anybody, and he was a badass. So whenever inmate Peters hit him as hard as he could, boom, boom, hit him in the head 2 times. Well, he busted him open, but the only thing Big Bruce did was turn around and looked at him. And when he did that, inmate Peters took off because he was scared, because he thought he would knock him out. But the only thing he did was piss him off. And he pissed him off to the degree where he's like, it's on now. And after that attack, the words were exchanged, and he said, now I got to kill you. Now I got to kill you. Well, inmate Peters didn't realize at that time that you just attacked a murderer. You just attacked a guy that is capable of killing you. So he takes off running and runs down the hallway and goes straight for an officer, and then basically asking the officer to save him. Well, Big Bruce just is wiping off the blood and trying to walk down the hall to find him, because in his mind, the only option there is to kill the dude. Straight up, you're going to kill him. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's where we're at. So inmate Peters ends up going to the officer, and basically in a prison setting like that, you have to always protect individuals. Even if they're wrong, they have to be protected. So when he sought help from the officer had to take him to a secure location and put him in a cage. And basically a cage it's like a phone booth, and it's a metal cage, and you put somebody in there to secure them, until you can figure out what's going on. So that's basically what happened. They took inmate Peters off to segregation and put him in one of the holding cages. Big Bruce, they took after he came out in the hallway bleeding. They got him, secured him, and took him to the medical unit of the hospital and did an assessment and put some stitches in him, and sent him back to his housing unit for that period of time till they could figure out what was going on. They went on lockdown, locked the unit down, and we secured the unit. After we secure the unit, then we have to do what's called an inquiry. And basically all that is unit manager and the staff, like counselor, case manager, etc. You interview everybody on the unit. So basically what you're trying to do is a fact-finding mission and trying to figure out what happened and why it happened. So during that process, on that particular time with those particular inmates, they didn't tell, because we had the breed of inmates at that time that weren't into that. So basically during the interview of 70 some inmates, about 79 inmates, you interview everyone. At that time we had to interview them all, and basically when you pull them in, you say, hey, do you know anything? Did you know anything about this incident? What do you know? Basically the answer was verbatim, every inmate would tell you, I was asleep or I was in the shower. And that was the standard answer, because basically they weren't telling you nothing, not telling you a thing. So during that process, you interview all those guys, you get basically nothing. So when we were able to pull Big Bruce in there, the only thing he said was, only thing I can tell you is, next time I see that dude, I'm killing him. Simple as that. It's over with. Ain't gonna be no fight to it. I'm killing him. If I gotta stick him, if I gotta do whatever, he's a dead man. So the question is now, what do you do with them? Then we go over and we interview the other inmate Peters, and we say, hey, what did you do that for, and what caused all this? Basically at the time, initially he said, I don't know what you're talking about. So it's always, plausible not deniability. I don't know, have no idea what you're talking about. But basically then we break it down to him and say, hey, this is what you're facing. Bottom line is you attack one of the most dangerous, notorious inmates that we have in the system. And right now he's pissed and he's probably going to kill you. If he can get a hold of you, you're hit. So you can play badass all you want, and you can play this game of amnesia all you want, but your life is in jeopardy because you picked the wrong one. And he finally got the understanding that I'm not a killer, and I want to go home. Basically, he breaks down, starts crying, and says, I want to go home. I don't want to die. I can't live. There's no way I can go back into general population. I'm scared. And we're like, well, why would you attack somebody if you're scared? Why would you assault somebody if you're scared? What do you want us to do? You're the one that chose to attack somebody and try to kill somebody. Because basically, if you're slinging locks with belts and smashing people in the skull, you can kill somebody. So when you attempt to kill somebody, their response might be, I'm going to kill you first. And what he didn't understand was the younger guys will throw out names, call people bitches and whores, and be disrespectful and get away with it. But there's a different caliber of inmate, and that's what we call a convict, an old con, whose codes are different. And their different codes is, if you mess with me, I'll kill you. I don't care about spending the rest of my life in prison, because if you do something, there's certain lines you don't cross. And that's the line that he crossed and he almost paid for it with his life. The long story short is we ended up having to move him to a different facility, completely out of the facility that he was in, which was ours, because we had to separate those two, because we knew that if they ever crossed paths, one of them was going to die. And it wasn't going to be Big Bruce, it was going to be the other guy, because there's a difference between fighters and killers in prison. And you can be a great fighter on the street and you can have the legend in your mind, but the bottom line is, if you're not a killer, don't mess with killers. And that's what these young guys need to understand when they're coming into prison is, you might think you're the biggest badass in the world, but you come to prison and there's somebody, always somebody bigger, badder, and more evil and more threatening than you are. And there's somebody that's willing to go to a place that you're not. So don't believe all that stuff you see on TV. Don't believe all that hype, because in the end, do you really want to die over something trivial, something petty, something that doesn't mean nothing? Or do you want to go home? And that's the other side of the cell as we look at that from my perspective. And I think about it all the time with these young kids that are out here doing wilding out and doing all this craziness. You guys got to understand, you don't want to come to prison, because a lot of you young guys are not built for prison. You are not. And if you get yourself in a situation and you end up in prison, mommy's not going to save you, daddy's not going to save you, granny ain't going to save you. Nobody's going to be able to save you from what you've gotten yourself into. So my advice to a lot of the younger kids out there is, you better not come to prison, and you better stop all this wilding out, because there's a difference between killers and fighters. Until the next time, like, share, and subscribe. Leave your comments below. Keep the comments coming, keep the suggestions coming, and we'll keep putting out video for you. Until next time, God bless.